Amanda. Nice to meet you. Welcome to our new, our NTU alumni club. Right. I'm from National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University. We train the teachers. As you know, we are the only teacher training institute in Singapore. And I'm from the Learning Sciences and Assessment Academic Group. Basically, our academic group trains all of the teachers who are going out to schools in how to design for technology-mediated learning. We, of course, do higher degree programs that are technology-mediated learning related topics. Thanks for having me over.
Okay, Shanti, yeah, it's great to have you here as well. I think today we just have a few questions related to education and technology. So I think the first question we wanted to ask is, as we move towards endemic, what changes that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic will kind of remain as part of education's new normal? So, and what's next for education?
I believe the circuit breaker during last year did prepare us for what we can expect as we move forward. Most of us were actually hoping that it would all go back to normal as in face-to-face lessons and so on, and that we will overcome this pandemic. But given this current situation, it is going to be endemic, which means a hybrid mode of learning has become a new norm. And that is something that it's a situation that the teachers are already currently dealing with. And I believe it will stay in the near future. I don't think it is going to change anytime soon. So in a hybrid mode, we will be expecting some of the students to actually log in from home, some of the students to be in school in a physical classroom. And that would very likely be what teachers will be designing for, and that would be your new norm in terms of learning in schools.
So in that case, with what you just said, we hear all these different terms very, very regularly, such as blended learning, home-based learning, virtual learning. And what are the key differences among these three points then?
Extremely good question, Amanda. A lot of times, I think we generally struggle with trying to differentiate, or sometimes these terminologies are very loosely used. Take blended learning to be the broader term that encompasses both your home-based learning as well as virtual learning. Now, within blended learning, there are two major components. There is the synchronous mode and asynchronous mode. So when we say synchronous mode, it is real-time interaction among the participants. Asynchronous mode is there is always a lag time, you can respond later or you can do it at your own time. So that generally encompasses blended learning. So when we talk about home-based learning could be both synchronous and asynchronous. So it is within that umbrella of blended learning in that sense. So students could be asked to do work in asynchronous mode while teachers remotely monitor them, and then you could actually meet up either in a physical classroom or in a virtual classroom, and the teacher could help facilitate the learning further. When we talk about virtual learning, it is really about real-time meeting, just like meeting via a Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, and it is really online real-time lessons that are going on. So that is in a synchronous mode, basically.
In that case, what is one of the greatest challenges you can say when it comes to blended learning then, since it's two different elements together?
Engaging your learners would be the biggest challenge. Generally, I think we are all of the mindset that, when I'm in a physical classroom, I have access to the teacher, I have access to the professor, or, the professor or the teacher could actually, look at the learners and actually help to, facilitate the learning. It's a lot of interaction that goes on in a physical classroom. I can turn to my peers, I can chat with them, and it's a very dynamic environment. As opposed to a blended learning environment, if it's asynchronous, which means while the advantage is that I have my own time to complete my work, but the reality is that I'm alone. I have to connect with somebody in order to actually have a conversation, which is again very contrived, very artificial in that sense. It's not a very natural process that we are used to in a physical classroom. Similarly, in a virtual classroom, again, I am in a room or I am by myself and I'm staring into a monitor. I may have 20 to 30 of my classmates there, but I am still very alone. And so it becomes a very different social dynamic situation. And so learners tend to be distracted because I'm all alone. And the very fact that I'm connected now means if my lesson is not engaging enough, I have social media that's going to distract me. I've got YouTube videos, I've got Facebook, name it. I could probably watch a whole, Korean drama while my professor is doing a lecture, right? Why would I want to watch a talking head? So I think engaging your learners is the biggest challenge as we move forward into such an environment.
I think I have to agree with you right there, Shanti, because as someone who just graduated not long ago, I've been quite guilty of doing something like that, or maybe not a Korean drama, but something of sorts, maybe like a YouTube video somewhere. But yeah, so with all these you've mentioned, that means blended learning is going to have a lot of difficulty to, hold a student down to really sit down for a lesson, right? And then this brings me kind of to my next question then. So there's this saying that it takes a village to raise a kid. And in this case, how has the role of parties in a child's ecosystem kind of changed in this sense, when you talk about things like trying to keep them concentrated on like a particular lesson, for example?
The biggest stakeholders or partners who have been affected, I believe, are parents. Being an educator and a parent myself, I find that there is greater probably expectation on myself, somewhat from the school maybe, but more for me to want to monitor my child because they are at home, especially for home-based learning or for the matter blended learning. You tend to want to know that, want to make sure that they are engaged, they are doing their work, they are logging in. So there's a lot more expectations on myself actually. It may not even be from the school, but I guess it is from me myself. The second partner group that might be probably affected would be the teachers. Teachers are so used to, take myself for example, we are so used to going down to the classroom, meeting our learners, doing content delivery, facilitating their activities. But while it sounds similar and it sounds very easy to just, hey, can we just transplant that to an online environment? But it is not so, because the entire learning environment is very different. So there is a lot of redesigning that needs to take place, a lot of thinking through which is the content that should go online in a synchronous environment, which we need to let go. Letting go is so difficult, to let it go and say, my learners will learn this, and having that, measures in place to monitor their learning. I think redesigning for the teachers is the biggest, challenge, I guess, and the role has changed drastically. For the students, for the learners themselves, I guess it is more a buddy system that I would think their role has changed in the sense that they have to become buddies in order to not only support each other academically but also socially, right? Because we are all alone, and when the learners feel alone, they would like to turn to their buddies. And I believe it is a lot more active buddy involvement now that is required more than in the past.
In this case, who has the most to adjust to? Is it as the schools, start to adopt blended learning approach? Is it the parents, the teachers, or the students in this case?
I will sympathize with the kids, the students. I think they have a lot to deal with. The changes that are happening, I think, is really not fair on some of the kids, because school is also a social environment where they actually meet up with their friends and they have fun and they have physical interaction. Now they have the parents all looking their shoulders. They have to adjust to the fact that the teachers may or may not be contactable all the time, given the fact that they have to message the teachers. It's a very new way of communicating, and they can't just turn to their friends who's sitting next to them in a physical classroom. It's very different now. I got a message. So while they are connected, the question really is, how real is that connection? It's really virtual in that sense.
I think I have to agree with you over right there as well. So while it was a bit different for me because I stayed in hall, so no one's watching over me, but I think for the primary school kids and the secondary school kids, that might be quite a huge change to have more than just one person trying to watch over you. And now, so in that case, is there anything we can do? Is there perhaps how can like a personalized education curriculum help the students more and help them more effectively when it comes to blended learning?
A lot of changes have been taking place, but I still feel that we need to prioritize and say, hey, what really needs to be taught, and how can we then allow for more differentiated learning in the schools so that your learning then becomes a lot more structured and catered to the needs of the students. Which means two main aspects that we really have to look into. Really look into curriculum review in terms of what is necessary, what is so good to have, and what really we don't need, and also redesigning how we actually deliver the curriculum. So there is more focus on the students, on giving them more personalized time, but with relevant monitoring mechanisms that are in place, and also to release time for teachers to be able to interact with the students, to make sure that their mental well-being is also taken care of. So I would say really personalized curriculum will be useful, and the fact that we are leveraging on technology is definitely a boon, but we have to do it right in terms of reviewing our curriculum and the delivery mode.
This also brings me to my next question then. So how has a teacher's curriculum, or in NIE, the curriculum has changed to adapt to this blended learning approach then?
In NIE, we adapted fairly quickly because we realized that we had to prepare our student teachers to go into schools and transit into the requirements of the new environment. So what we started doing was to model blended learning practices. So our courses themselves have adopted blended learning approaches. We design for asynchronous and synchronous mode. We have a mix of both physical and virtual classes. We model how virtual classes should be conducted, how it could be complemented with various synchronous tools, and we think aloud about the design. In my academic group in particular, we do think aloud the design of how the professors have designed for the blended learning courses. And when the student teachers are actually participating, we do some level of reflection as to why we released certain content before class, right? Why we are focusing on maybe more application work during our virtual classrooms. Why do we have complementing synchronous chat group so that there is more communication that is going on. So we talk about the whole ecosystem that has been created to support the learning. The second, approach that we've taken is to allow for more opportunities for our student teachers to practice designing for blended learning. So they design for lessons in their subject content areas, and what we do is we evaluate those lessons, we give them feedback. They are also given opportunities to actually trial those lessons and gather feedback from their peers. So they have some level of experience when they are with us in participating, in designing for blended learning, and to implement it and to gain some level of experience. That's how we have actually adapted our curriculum.
We discussed all these about teachers, but what aspect of the learners, their well-beings have been most drastically affected during this time then, since teachers are, curriculum-wise, and then, what about for students?
I guess with the new norm, It's the mental well-being. There's limited places that they could go out to. They can't hang around with their friends. Lesson starts, they're at home and they are sitting in front of their monitor. Lesson ends, they're still sitting in front of their monitor. And it used to be a case where I come back from school, maybe I will sit down and watch some YouTube video, or I will play online games with my friends or something like that. But now, I guess the students hardly move away from their monitor, and that does affect them. Fatigue will definitely set in. So, be it physical as well as mental well-being, I think we really need to teach them, or rather educate them, or make suggestions as to how they should be, balancing both the HBL lessons as well as their, having that relaxed time away from their mobile devices and to go out and get some fresh air. Biggest challenge would be somebody, and that's where I guess parents come in if they're at home, monitoring them and actually getting them into somewhat a habit of taking care of themselves. I guess that would, to me, is something that the children really have to adapt to, and to start taking care of themselves. Otherwise, you're going to find a lot of our children burning out far sooner than required.
Now, in this case, we discussed both like the problems that teachers and students are facing separately. Is there, could you share with us potentially like 3 existing or emerging technology tools that have been very useful for maybe, let's say, teachers and students as both transit into this blended learning approach?
In Singapore in particular, I think we were very, very lucky because Ministry did start work far earlier on the student learning space. That is a platform that is in every school in Singapore. Every student has an account, and teachers have been trained to use that as a platform. And so prior to student learning space, different schools were on different learning management system, and so now we have a uniform platform that was ready for teachers to use when circuit breaker kicked in, and now they continue to use it because of the hybrid mode of learning. So the student learning space has been really a boon, and it's commendable that in our Singapore education system, the first, I would say, in the world to actually have a uniform system across all schools. So there's connectivity, or rather accessibility, for students to access the resources, and for teachers to actually prepare the resources and to ensure that the students have access to it. The second, broadly speaking, would be tool that I would say has come in very, very useful would be any of our cloud productivity tools. So with the cloud productivity tools, like, you've got your Word, and your PowerPoint and so on, Excel spreadsheet and so on. The way of communicating and monitoring the students, real-time collaboration, these are, aspects of our work life that has now strongly cascaded down to school. So students are working seamlessly, they are collaborating, they are, sending, feedback, teachers are sending feedback to the students, and there is, progressively, work being monitored. Soft copy of files are being uploaded into, drives. This is really a new norm of working, actually. And I think cloud productivity really has come in as a boon. Because you don't meet your teachers physically. And so a lot of interaction has to take place in cloud-based systems. So that has really helped teachers to maneuver around, and students to, work on their whether it's essays or whatever. And lastly, I would think any of the game-based learning apps would also be an added advantage and has really helped teachers because it creates enthusiasm in the class. We could, provide for a competitive environment, and at the same time actually monitor the students' learning. There is that fun element that has been inbuilt, so that there's laughter when you make a mistake, or you're competing with your friends for the extra point, and so on. I guess the gaming element within some of these quizzes has helped the students to forget about the fact that, oh, I'm not physically there in the classroom, but, want to actually participate. And teachers have a way of doing, whole class interactive sessions through these quizzes and game-based learning. So broadly speaking, I would think these three broad categories of tools have really helped a lot of us in trying to create a more engaging environment.
I think you gave a lot of insight, a lot of depth to a lot of the questions everyone has in mind when it comes to blended learning, and gave a lot of clarification to what students can expect or what teachers are doing right now. So any advice would you give to students who want to take up your challenge statement?
I'm actually very excited to see, what would come out of the solutions, or, what interests them actually to take up the challenge statement. I would really want them to address the challenge statement from their perspective, from the student's perspective, from the learner's perspective. The whole idea of crafting the challenge statement was really to benefit the learners, and what can we do to improve the learning environment, the learning situation, and how best can we optimize it. So I would really firstly want them to think about the challenge statement from their perspective as learners. Secondly, I want them to think out of the box, not be limited by the constraints and the limitations that we are currently facing, but what are the possibilities that are out there that maybe we are not even thinking about. So really think out of the box, and to see whether we could actually make some of the solutions a reality, and that would be my second advice to them. Thirdly, I believe whatever solutions that they are providing, while it may have short-term benefits, I hope it will be a solution that will be sustainable, right, in the long run, so that it is not here just to address short-term problems, but rather in the long run, it is here to stay, and it is going to address some of the issues, problems that we are facing and we might be facing. So those would be my three areas that I would really want them to address the challenge statement from.
Okay, thank you, Shanti, for all the things that you've mentioned earlier. The 3 points, especially I think the last one on sustainability. Since we're talking about Sustainathon, this whole event, it is very important that the ideas can run in the future, and definitely we talk about the long run, them running into the long term. So yeah, we really appreciate having you here, and thank you so much for all the clarification and the knowledge and information that you have shared.
Thank you, Amanda. The pleasure is all mine. I had a great time chatting with you.